First, we have Kelsey Applebaum, the head of community partnerships at Vankst. Kelsey. Kelsey has an established career in cannabis recruitment by applying her 7+ years of team building experience to the growing cannabis industry. Really excited. Kelsey has been a Revelry speaker before. She has blessed our stage before. Vankst has blessed our program before. They're here in New York. They're ready to connect with workers, so we're excited to have Kelsey with us today. Next, we have Nikki Cateman. Nikki is the Political and Communications Director of Local 338 of the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Nikki's union currently represents all of the unionized cannabis workers in this state. Yo, give it up for labor. We don't fuck around with labor. Look. I have known Nikki for over 10 years. Oh, shit. We were little baby advocates, and I'm telling you, when it comes to politics, don't mess with this woman right here. Don't mess with this woman right here. She has been fighting for cannabis workers. She has been fighting for the industry, and we are really happy to have you. Our last panelist is Sarah Ibarra, Senior Account Executive at WeMaps. Give it up for Sarah. Sarah made the cross-country trip from California. And look, WeMaps sees operators up and down the supply chain. So who better to really talk about the full scope of what this workforce might look like, what those tens of thousands of jobs might look like and mean in the retail sector, in the processing sector, in the cultivation sector, security, across the entire industry. So we're excited to have Sarah with her expertise at WeMap. So y'all ready to get started? Y'all ready to get started? Oh, one more thing. Cannabis legalization is New York, her story. The bill, prime sponsors, 2 women, 1 black woman. The bill was passed March 31st, the last day of Women's History Month. And I gotta give a shout out. There were so many advocates, so many folks who had their finger on legalization, who worked, who toiled, who fought for years. It wasn't one person's victory, but we often point to an individual who, for years and years and years, was putting narrative and story around this. So even though she's not here with us today, I want to give it up for Cassandra Frederic, the Executive Director of the Drug Policy Alliance. So I am very excited to be moderating this panel with these 3 badass women in cannabis. So let's get to it. All right, so Nikki, I'm gonna start with you. As I said, New York City is a labor city. New York State is a labor state. We have so many historical victories and milestones for the labor movement that have their home and start in New York. So how is the labor movement throwing down for cannabis workers now? And how do you plan to use the power of the labor movement to ensure communities like Bed-Stuy are prepared to reap the benefits of the new industry?
Awesome. So I'll give a little bit of background. We got involved in the cannabis space in New York about a decade ago. And we really recognized that if New York was creating a brand new industry, we wanted to make sure that these were not minimum wage, part-time, dead-end jobs, and that we were really fostering a space where the jobs were going to be able to uplift workers. And when the conversation about the MRTA really developed, and it obviously is centered and focused in equity and opportunity, as a stakeholder that prioritizes economic justice, we knew quite well that the conversations around equity and opportunity were going to be centered in creating generational wealth. And we recognize, right, as the labor movement, the traditional avenue into generational success and community sustainability is through a good union job. And so we fought very hard to make sure that in those conversations around how are we creating generational wealth, and how are we correcting historic injustices, that workers were not being left behind, that they were part of the conversation and that they were a focus point. So in the time between the passage of the Compassionate Care Act and the first adult use cannabis licenses opening, Local 330 has unionized about 80% of the industry, and that is growing. We're really proud of the standard we've set for what cannabis careers, because these are careers, can and should be in New York, right? We're talking about family-sustaining wages, health benefits, paid time off, on-the-job protections. And to give you some context, many of our members, when they first joined Local 338, they were telling us that they only got 2 paid days off, that they couldn't afford the health insurance that we were getting. So we wanted to make sure that these jobs in New York are really good jobs and they're creating an opportunity for people. And so you alluded to it in your question, right? It is great that good union jobs exist, but if they're not open to communities, then we're not doing the right thing, right? And as a union that represents not just workers in the cannabis space, but also our members that we represent in other industries do live in communities and they work in communities that have had the hardest fallout from the war on drugs. So we're taking it very personally that we're creating pathways to these jobs. One of the things we're doing is we partnered with the Cannabis Workforce Initiative to create education and training opportunities so that folks speak the language of cannabis. They're at a competitive advantage in job interviews, but helping them access those job interviews. We're partnering with community-based organizations, elected officials, the Department of Labor who is here to make sure that people know these jobs exist, what these jobs are, and the benefits of being in a union. And the last thing I will say, right, is there is an existing cannabis industry in New York. And one of the things we are doing our best is pushing these companies when they are opening job opportunities, that they're giving first crack to under and unserved communities. And we're even going so far as making sure they're connecting with the appropriate community-based organizations and trusted community partners so that they know where to have job fairs and how to access the talent that is often overlooked in communities.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Kelsey, so, you had years in the game, years and years in the game, and have talked to our Revelry community before about your work at Vanks in job creation and connecting workers to opportunities. So can you just talk to us a little bit more about the work you do at Vanks and how recruitment and job placement services can play a key role in providing pathways and access to communities for careers in cannabis?
Yeah, something that I'm really proud of is that over the past 6 years of my journey in cannabis that I've been able to work with cannabis companies in 30 states, 5 countries, and I've contributed to license applications in 15 markets. Something that I've realized throughout that is that everybody needs someone to lean on when they're trying to figure out where to start that journey. That journey for everyone is really unique, and we want to create resources for them. That being said, there's not one path, there is not one place to start, but the most common question that we get asked is, where do I begin? At the end of the day, you should all begin where it makes the most sense for you, but the best advice that I can give is actually start in spaces like this. Connect with your community, reach out, join advocacy groups, and see where that network takes you. These opportunities and showing up to spaces and events like this actually lead to the best opportunities in cannabis, so keep doing that. I think that that's where everybody's path will ultimately begin, and then ultimately we'll also join an industry that is really contributing to the growth of our country. So, yeah.
Thank you, thank you. So when I worked in state government and was working on drafting and negotiating the MRTA, Weed Maps was one of the first companies that we met with, and I remember like sitting in the meeting and leaning over, being like, "What the hell is Weed Maps?" and it's taking me a long time to figure out exactly what Weed Maps is, and more not just specific to Weed Maps. But really, I've learned a lot about the relationship and intersection between the cannabis industry and tech. And so, Sarah, can you sort of demystify a bit for the folks really, what Weed Maps is, but also like what are those intersections and relationships between cannabis and tech, and what opportunities are there at those intersections that folks need to be thinking about?
Yeah, definitely. I think some of the more important things that people don't notice about Weed Maps is not only do we do advertising on the platform, but we have a lot of integrators that we work directly with. So point of sale has been something that as an early adopter in Weed Maps, we wanted to make sure that we don't just connect with one point of sale, but we actually intersect with multiple point of sales. And that just only alleviates the stress that the retailer may have. They can actually choose from that. And as we progress, I think some of the features that have brought on are the online ordering platform. You know, many of us were used to ordering directly from, let's say, Starbucks. When I started at Weed Maps 6 years ago, Starbucks was just a thing. You can actually place your order, you walk in, you pick up your order. But now, cannabis, being that online ordering is so familiar in certain states, it's huge. It blew up, especially during the time of COVID. And I think with orders, being able to place your order and having that pickup, you have an availability. So as a consumer, you just basically order your product online. Next thing you know, you're driving up to the dispensary and walking away. So it's a huge technology feature that we do have, as well as the delivery service operation. So as deliveries are coming online, what's important is we're seeing these deliveries actually make it to people's doors, and people that are especially in the situation where they may be a vet or may not be able to walk directly into a retail shop, those delivery services are really providing safe access for those consumers. As well as a lot of people don't notice that Weed Maps, aside from the advertising that we do on platform, we also do a lot of advertising away from the platform as well. So any programmatic, any display, billboards that you guys may be seeing, we even do gas station advertising now. So if you're at a gas station and you see at the pump, it pops up. It's really important to find out ways that you can attract your consumers. And that's a way that Weed Maps has came about, is really trying to find how we can get those consumers and draw that attention to that retailer. Some of the positions you may not notice that are available in the cannabis industry. I know Tremaine had mentioned a few in the beginning, but we're looking at a lot of developers and engineers and coders, people that are working on the customer service side and the sales side. Those are people that are actually generating and pushing our platform and making sure that we're operating at all times. So even though you might not be a coder or an engineer, you still may find a place in the cannabis industry. I know I see a lot of females out there. Me being a female in the industry has been very passionate for myself, and I think that comes with a lot of how we're moving in this industry, is we want to bring and have a diverse group of people coming in, not just one set of individual.
Thank you. Perfect. Oh, Nikki, I actually want to come back to you. I forgot to ask you something. There's a term both in the MRTA and that may not be familiar to people, the term labor peace. And, we're talking about workforce development, and our focus really is on really opening up this dialogue and conversation about how we get folks ready to take advantage of careers. But I think you also have information to share for entrepreneurs and operators because you will be hiring a unionized workforce. So what is labor peace, and why is that a critical piece of the social equity puzzle?
Absolutely. So the labor peace agreement is a requirement that was outlined in the statute of the MRTA. You will need that to apply for any license, regardless of what license you're applying for or how big your business is. So I like to start with what labor peace agreements are not, because usually that's the thing people get tripped up with. So labor peace agreements do not mean union contracts, so that's something that comes later on. Labor peace agreements have no standards for who you hire. You are the sole discretion of doing that, although advocate for hiring locally and diversely. So what a labor peace agreement actually is, so it's a document that's signed by both parties, the applicant and a bona fide labor union, and that's a really important definition to look at when you're filling out your license application, because it's defined in the guidance. So to make sure you're working with like a real union. And so what the labor peace agreement is a document that both parties agree to not disparage each other. The employer will not hinder any opportunities for the workers to join a union. It creates a framework for the union to be able to speak to workers in a non-disruptive manner. But what it essentially does, right, because the state has a vested interest in this program and its success, which means the success of workers, that it creates a pathway for workers to join a union if that's the way they decide to go. And I think it's a really important document. I will give a plug for our website, which is cannabislpa.com, that has a frequently asked questions, goes through everything you need to know about an LPA, and also how to go about starting to secure one. And it's a quick process. We try to make it painful. It's a meet and greet. I like to think of it as a relationship building document for a long partnership for the years to come.
Thank you. And I'm going to actually pose this next question to both Sarah and Kelsey, because we do have, city, state, government partners here, and cannabis, especially legal cannabis, is as new to the regulators and city and state officials as it is to the community. So if you were, talking to some of those folks here, what can you share with them about programs, resources that they should be providing for a community that will help prepare people to enter into the cannabis workforce? And Kelsey, why don't you start?
Yeah, I think first of all, every company that operates and every license holder in cannabis, either current or future, has an obligation to contribute to their community. You can't have a strong cannabis community without a diverse group of people. The diverse mindset, the diverse backgrounds, the diverse skill sets all lead to a stronger company. If you have a company that has a one-track mind or one personality or one type of background, how sustainable can they be? How impactful can they be? The biggest impact comes from a diverse group of people. So the more resources that they create in order to do that, the better. Now that's not as easy as it seems. You have to invest in your culture. You have to invest into company operations that actually sustain this. That starts with hiring practices. That starts with actually engaging with the community that you represent and hiring from there versus just looking. What I always like to remind people is if you just have a job description, you're never actually going to be able to hire a person. You need to actually look at what that person's bringing to the table, challenge them to step up, encourage them to do more than just that job description, and then ultimately your company will thrive because the entire company is working towards the same mission.
Yeah, I think as far as the community, they should really start to listen and be involved. There are certain stakeholders that you want to get your information to, and I think as far as making sure that we educate a lot of the consumers, not only just on safe access, on how to consume, because I think that's a lot of misinformation out there on how to consume, what you're consuming, what is the best practices in consuming. And I think those are ways that we can better educate, as well as just making sure that everyone in this room and everyone outside of here knows how to get to those careers. There are a lot of careers in cannabis, but how do you actually access those careers? Are they job boards? Are they people that you talk to? Can you get it just from somebody that mentors you? So really just digging into finding out who those people are and how you guys can actually get consumption and safe access is really going to be educational for everyone.
Yeah, I would actually love to add that in addition to just seeing cannabis as a product which you can consume, you have to understand that there's so much that goes into it. And part of that advocacy actually starts with the people that are here. There are jobs for everyone. There's not just jobs for people that consume. There's not just jobs for people with one skill set. Really anybody at this point can have a job in cannabis. There are jobs, like you mentioned, for people within the tech space, sales, advocacy, really every aspect. And the more people that understand what those opportunities look like, the more diversity we're going to end up seeing. We love to create opportunities for people from all different backgrounds because that's ultimately what's going to be best for our industry.
Definitely.
Thank you. I'm really glad you said that piece about you don't have to consume in order to find a career pathway here. I think that's really important, and often folks disengage or fail to engage because they don't necessarily have a relationship with the plant and don't want to or think about having a consumption relationship with the plant. So And that's a part of what we're doing today. There's so much stigma that these conversations are necessary sometimes to really sort of remove that veil of stigma for folks who wouldn't necessarily see themselves in the industry because of the relationship that their communities have had. So I'm going to do the same thing I did on the last panel to close out. I'm going to ask each of you the same question, and it's essentially the same thing I asked the last panel. I want to reinforce that we are now in an emerging cannabis market, right? Weed is legal in New York State. Licenses for adult use have been issued. More license applications are on the way. We are building a cannabis supply chain. This isn't practice. It ain't a test. It's for real. And so 5 years from now, hopefully, we will have a mature market. And so for each of our panelists, what's your vision? What are we going to be sitting here talking about in the summer of 2027? When we have a mature cannabis market, and also just tell the people where they can find you. Nikki, you want to start?
So I think in 5 years from now, I'm very excited about the educational opportunities we're going to be seeing, right? Everything's still developing at community colleges, nonprofit organizations, so I'm really excited about the education. And I'm optimistic that in 5 years from now, we're going to have a very exciting workforce who, if you know anything about cannabis workers, to digress for a second, is they're natural advocates. They are already advocates, and they are very invested in and passionate about the work they're doing. So I think we're seeing all workers rise up and stand up for themselves across the country. I think in New York we're going to see workers who are very passionate about the success of this industry, holding it accountable. So I think in 5 years from now we're going to see a lot of really good jobs. We're going to be talking about the success of workforce development here in New York. I will just also, one other thing, my favorite part of the MRTA is a little known section that talks about a 2-year look back to analyze and assess how well the industry is doing, so that if there's a course correction that needs to happen, it will happen, because there's a commitment to making sure this industry is diverse at the top, but also in the workforce. So at that point, that course correction will be happening, and we will be on the path to the best program in the country.
Right. Kelsey? Yeah, that's fine. You give it up for Nikki.
Yeah, to me, the success of every market is really going to be based on the regulations that actually shape it. You cannot have a sustainable market unless those regulations include everybody and create opportunities for those that have been affected by predatory laws. At the end of the day, without an inclusive industry, it's not going to grow in a sustainable manner. A lot of times what we find with new markets, especially since I've been in the industry for 6 years, is that they equate success to how much revenue they bring in on the first day, or the first week, or the first year, and that's just not true. A market is not able to be sustainable unless they truly give back and represent the communities which they serve. So my hope is that that's something that we continue to see in New York. That being said, it's estimated that there's 76,000 new jobs in cannabis that should be created in New York itself. And I'm hoping that the license holders in each of those markets within New York, as well as the teams that represent them, are true indicators of the communities that they represent and they operate within. I think cannabis has the ability to add to New York's amazing culture if it's done right. If it's done right, the industry is going to thrive.
How many jobs was that?
76,000 jobs in cannabis in New York in 5 years.
Everybody say 76,000. I said say 76,000. All right, I just want to make sure you heard. Sarah, close us out, baby.
I think that in the next 5 years, we would want to see a diverse and inclusive industry here. I think what's really, driving a lot of people to come out is their passion here, and that's the reason why we all want to share that information to somebody else. So being able to provide that over time, as well as just making sure that, when people are consuming, that they are able to have that responsibility as either if you're a retailer, that other people do respect that in the industry, and that when you're providing those services to the community, you're going to be seen as that value to the industry. And I think one thing that I've always noticed is that it doesn't always leave the average person that has the average capital to get into the industry. So just making sure that we do have that opportunity, that it leaves not only an average person to get into it, but also just a consumer like you and I who goes to purchase a product. You don't want to purchase a product that has a high value or a high dollar amount. You actually want to be able to afford it. So being able to have that in the industry is going to be very important moving forward.
All right, let's give it up one more time for Kelsey, Nikki, and Sarah.